This evolution is a two-part process. The first is tender operations with direct pumping from the tenders. The second part is transitioning to a porta-tank operation. We're using the engine as a simulation of the first attack engine dropping a tail, laying in, and starting to flow water. An alternative for the drill is you can just use the ram in a short section of 5-inch to simulate the engine. The key here is the engine has to leave the triames. The first arriving tender is going to set up the tail so it can be pumped by two tenders at the same time or one after the other. He's going to pull a section of 3-inch from the dead lay and initially attach it to the center port on the triames, which is ideal. It doesn't really matter which, but you have less hoses crossing. The AO is going to go ahead and hook up this line to a discharge, and as soon as the line is attached to the triames, they're going to charge it and get water flowing up the line. The next line is going to be to set up a second dump site behind the first tender so two tenders can be ready to go or pumping at the same time if they need maximum volume. You have two choices to move your equipment up to where the porta-tank operation is. If you have time while you're pumping, you can hoof it on up there by just carrying the lighter items. The second option is just to wait until you disconnect, drive up to the site, and dump everything at that time. The second tender comes in and hooks up to the second dump site. If you're trying to maintain a flow, you're going to pump one after the other. The second tender is going to wait till the first tender is empty. So the crew is still moving stuff up to where the porta-tank operation is going to be set up if they decide to use it. This crew moved everything up except for the porta-tank, which is the heaviest item. So they're going to drop that and then head to the fill site to refill. More items come up from the second tender to set up for the second porta-tank. The drafting engine swings in on the downstream side of the operation to start setting up porta-tank operations. Ideally, put the tarp out first so we're not messing up the liner. Also put the first tank so it's sticking out 4 to 6 feet into the drive so that the tenders can dump into it without scraping down the side of the engine. On our contender engines, they need 3 sections of hard suction to be able to get the jet siphon to sit flat in the tank. They're also going to attach the 75-foot 1.75-inch line that was dropped as part of the package they were dropping onto the jet siphon. 75 feet is kind of long for the first tank, but it's just right for the second. The tenders are still pumping the tail with direct pumping until there are enough tenders lined up that there's a couple of spares. The first tender that is available comes in and fills the first tank, which is known as the drafting tank. The AO on the engine is now attaching his discharge to the last remaining port in the triames. After the porta-tank is filled, the drafting engine can charge their line to the jet siphon to help get the draft started. Once we got a second porta-tank dropped, you set it up right next to the first one. And you repeat the same operation, except you don't need to run a hard suction to the engine. You're just setting it up so you can lift water from the second porta-tank, which is the dump tank, into the drafting tank, which is just the tank you're trying to keep full at all times. Secure the hose to the porta-tank so it doesn't flip up. Remember, we're trying to keep that first tank full, so if it starts to empty, the next tender in can top it off and just slide forward to fill the dump tank. The engineer's just charged the jet siphon on the second, and if he's running it between 120 and 150, he's going to be lifting somewhere between 500 and 600 gallons a minute into the first tank.